Is anyone in our society disposable? Can we just throw them away? I think a lot of us probably said no to that. At least I hope we did. But what if somebody causes harm, does something bad, but wants to make amends for it and join the community again? What do we do then? Did your answer change? Did you decide that they're disposable? That really is the question at the heart of this, especially for us as people who proclaim that anyone and everyone is redeemable. If everyone is potentially redeemable, how do we know that it's safe to let someone who did harm back into our... Is there any way to know? Or do we just throw them away and discard? That's a hard question to wrestle with. And the early church had to wrestle with this too. In Acts, we find the story of the Apostle Paul, back when he was Saul, a persecutor of the church, who then has a miraculous conversion that no one believes until he makes them believe it. We can learn a lot from that story about what to do when someone who intentionally caused harm now wants to be part of the community. So let's discuss that kind of discernment as we walk together down creation's path. Hello, everyone. My name is Charlie. I am a Christopagan druid and priest of Bridget.
Hello, everyone. My name is Brian. I'm a Christopagan druid and sous chef to the Dagda.
And you might have noticed that we disappeared for a little bit there. Yeah, a fun disease came into the house, a nice little illness that knocked both of us out for a while. And we're doing better now. But I still feel like my voice isn't quite where it should be. So if it's got a little bit too much vocal fry in it, I'm sorry. I'm getting better. I'm doing my best here. But yeah. Wear a mask when you're out in public.
Yeah, it was especially if it's a decency thing. If you're not feeling well, just wear a mask. Like, I know it's for some of us, it's not comfortable, but it's the nice thing to do to other people. Like, I had to go out in the public after I'd gotten sick, and I made sure to wear a mask until I was feeling well enough to not feel sick anymore. So at least I wouldn't have others suffer from what I had to suffer from. It was that really nasty flu that went around.
I don't think it was a flu because I lost my sense of smell and taste. But it's possible I got 2 bugs and you only got 1.
Yeah, it was a mess. And then with the advent of spring is the advent of both of us and our allergies and sinus and all those lovely seasonal, I wanted to say disorders. It kind of is.
This is my seasonal affective disorder because I am currently fighting with a sinus headache caused by the spring arriving. So yeah, it's going to be a fun episode.
Yeah, because it was timed where even at the beginning of it, the first couple of days, I didn't think I was sick. I thought I was just having a bad allergy attack. And by the third day, it was like, okay, no, this has moved beyond sinuses. Oops. Which, of course, was then too late because poor Charlie was around an unmasked.
The whole time.
Unmasked plague spreader.
Alrighty. So today we're going to be talking about how to discern somebody who has done harm to the community and wishes to return to it, claims to be a changed person. How exactly do you do that? We are going to be making reference to the story of Paul in Acts 9. But before we get into all that, if you haven't already, don't forget to like, subscribe, follow, whatever the terminology happens to be on whatever app you're listening to us on. We are putting a lot of work into putting together some of the best Christopagan and creation spirituality content for you on a weekly basis. And you really don't want to miss a thing. We have a lot of fun stuff coming up. There's stuff coming up that I've been working on that Brian doesn't even know about yet. And it's going to be fun to be like, oh, by the way, here's next. So definitely make sure that you're subscribed. We got a lot of fun stuff coming. All right, let's just jump into it, shall we?
I found the exploration of Acts 9 from this perspective really enlightening. Growing up, very familiar with the story of Paul when he got blinded by the light and got his vision back and he could see the Lord and, had his whole conversion and stuff. Familiar with that. But this was just really fascinating because of the way you really dive into it and go bit by bit, following that journey of the experience. And it really got me thinking about that question that always comes up. As somebody living in the kingdom, we're all about people being redeemed and being redeemable. That all of us are stolen from the way, and being able to turn back onto the path, and that anybody can have that as an idea. But in practice, when you have somebody come to you who's been absolutely deplorable, and they're like, I did all these horrible things, but you know what? I've seen the light. Realizing that this story really walks you through a lot of those steps. Because you have Paul. He's the dude who had Stephen kill Stephen's death. He was the rabbi that everybody turned to. And he went, oh yeah, totally. Kill him. You stoned him to death right in front of Paul. Like he was going around actively hunting Christians and having them killed and having them dealt with by the state. We'll leave it at that. Killed by the state, who literally bugged the head of the temple to get special dispensation to go out and persecute Christians. And he was on his journey going, I know where a bunch of them are at. I'm going to go to this town and get them. When he got hit through this, you have these Christians that are already living in dangerous times under Roman rule, and with the temple also not being happy with them, because any radical sect can come to just crack down and murder everything, because that's what they're living under. Knowing that this isn't the guy on the doorstep, like, hey.
Actually, it's worse than that. He doesn't show up on the doorstep. When you actually read the story, and it is just one of the most honest moments of faith I've ever read in the Bible, to be honest. Ananias receives a vision from God. Jesus converts Paul, who is still called Saul at this time, but we're going to call him Paul so that, to make it easier for people who aren't familiar with the biblical story. So he's had his Damascus moment. He's blind. He cannot see. So Jesus now goes to Ananias and says, hey, I got a new convert for you. I need you to go pick him up and take care of him, get him fed and washed up and baptize him, because he's one of ours now. He's just off from the front. So Ananias is like, oh, who is it? And Jesus is like, it's Paul. And Ananias is like, oh, no. This is a different guy than I'm thinking of, right? It's definitely not the guy who's on his way to Damascus to kill us, right? And Jesus is like, nope, it's that one. Go get him. This is like, but of course he says, okay. But there is so much trepidation in this moment that just feels so honest and real. And if you've ever felt that stirring of the spirit to go do a thing, and then you realize, oh wait, I'm supposed to do what? Are you sure? And I love that it has this moment of Ananias being like, Lord, are you sure?
You mean Paul lives over on 5th Street, right? Not Paul of Tarsus who's coming to kill everybody.
Oh,
Fifth Street.
No, it's that Saul. Okay. This is going to be fine. And then we see him go through a process. And the process really tells us a lot of things. And I'm not going to walk through the story step by step, because I think it's more instructive for us at this point to highlight certain aspects of it. If you want to read the full thing, head over to creationspast.com and read the whole article. It's a doozy, but it goes through step by step the entire process, everything that happened. We're just kind of going to hit some of the major highlights here. And the first highlight that we have here, and it's an important one, is Paul messes up right from the beginning. When Ananias baptizes him, the scales fall from his eyes and he can see again. Good. And he immediately goes out and starts preaching.
And this was really interesting, because this was one of those subtle things that I missed multiple times going through the story. And even reading through the article, it took me a moment. I had to backtrack and go, wait a minute. So, why is he in trouble? He had his conversion. He's good, right?
And Acts actually has two versions of this story. There's the one that is told to us by the writer of the book. There's one that's given to us later by Barnabas, who, when recounting the story from his point of view, actually tells it slightly differently. And I find that point interesting, in that the author did not correct either version to bring them in line with each other. That is a very interesting thing to me. One of the big problems here is that he immediately goes out and starts preaching. And that doesn't strike a lot of people as odd, but when you think about it, it is. And it is on two levels. One, he just got here. He did. He just showed up. And remember, he doesn't know anything at this point. These events, chronologically, take place about 4 years after the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus. So the church is technically 4 years old by this point in time, and has had to find a way in the world without Jesus for 4 years. In that time, Paul has not been a follower of the way of Jesus. He may have absorbed some of their teachings because while he was going after these people to persecute them, but he definitely has not received instruction. He has not been taught the way. He simply feels it's good. I can go preach. This is problematic for two reasons. One, it does not endear him to the community at all, either to the Christians or to the Jews in the synagogue. And it's an important note here that in Barnabas's retelling of the story, he refers to them as Hellenists, not Jews.
That's the fascinating thing that I find right there. The Hellenist point. Sorry, I almost said Hellenistic plot, and that's not quite right. We say that a lot. But it was like you had this guy who now is publicly preaching, like he's saying the right things. I'm a Christian, da 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 da, which is upsetting the Jews because they're like, wait, I thought you were supposed to put this thing down. And the Christians are going, yeah, you're saying the right things, but are you really, or are you just a narc?
I want to correct you there. We don't know if he was saying the right things. The scripture does not tell us that, and it does not say what he was saying in preaching. To me, when the note that Barnabas made that he upset the Hellenists, he means these are people like Philo of Alexandria who were practicing a form of Judaism that was very heavily influenced by Middle Platonism. So unlike the Judaism that we know today, that made a very concerted effort to remove all of that influence from itself, these were people who believed in a divine logos who was an intermediary between God and man. Philo talks about this a lot, as do many of the Targums, which were paraphrase translations of the I want to say Torah, but they were from all of the books of the Tanakh that were around at the time. And when I say paraphrase translations, they were being translated into the vernacular of the local community, but often with not commentary. It didn't have like footnotes. The translators just wrote their opinion into the text. And so they were theological paraphrases. It's something kind of akin to the Amplified Bible in the United States.
I know for me, that was something that really resonated with me as well, because knowing from history that not too much later on, there's this whole eruption of violence in Alexandria between the Hellenists and the Christians and all the murder and rioting and everything that erupts out of it. It almost seems like here's a guy who says, hey, I'm converted. And the first thing he does is he starts beef with the Hellenists. He starts beefing with them publicly.
What that tells me is he was not so much proclaiming Jesus as he was proclaiming this form of Hellenized Judaism. Hellenized, if you don't know, the Greeks called themselves the Hellas. And so that means Greek. It means they were Greek.
Not as in like hell with the flames and burning.
Yeah. But he was actually probably preaching this more Philo-style Hellenized Judaism and then throwing the word Jesus in periodically, which is probably what caused a lot of the anger there. But what really is going on here is what is known as the zeal of the converted. This is problematic because those who convert to a faith typically have more zeal than those who have been in it for a while or those who have been raised in it. They are much more willing and desiring to go out and proclaim the good news that brought them into the faith. Now, the problem with this is one, like I kept saying, Paul has not been instructed in the faith. We do not know that he knows any of the teachings of Jesus or anything really about him. We have no context for what he actually knew about Jesus or the way. Second of all, this is the easiest thing to fake, because as long as you can remember the talking points and deliver them in a enthusiastic way, you appear to be faithful. And so this is an instinct that a lot of converted people have, but it is also the easiest instinct to fake, because again, just memorize your talking points and be a good actor, and you can convince a lot of people that you have in fact changed your ways when you haven't. Everyone kind of sees this. Everyone kind of sees through this, and they plot to kill him. They then sneak him out of the city. They put him in a basket, put him out a window in the wall, lower him down and take him away. Now, the scripture now tells us, again, two contradictory stories about what happened. The actual text says he went from there to Jerusalem. I'm going to be generous to the text and say that it does not tell us how he got there. because Barnabas tells us a different story, that he went from Damascus to Caesarea to Tarsus to Jerusalem, and that Barnabas was with him through all of that and got to see the person he is now.
And the fun thing I like about that is my favorite phrase, it is technically correct. Going from Damascus to Jerusalem is that other journey as well. The other journey is just more detailed.
This tells us how we actually do this kind of discernment. Barnabas spent time with him. Barnabas was one of the people who was sent out by the church in Jerusalem to make sure that everyone was being taken care of, everyone got what they needed, and taking up the collection that would be brought back to Jerusalem to make sure that everyone there was taken care of. So this was Barnabas' job. He traveled along the circuit of early churches and did this. Later, Paul and Barnabas will do this together, and that becomes the beginning of the story of Paul in the book of Acts. But what Barnabas tells us is, I spent time with him. I got to know him. I can vouch for him. And that is, unfortunately, the tricky and hard part of how we actually do this discernment. Jesus tells us all we need to know here. You will know them by their fruits. If they leave peace, they're probably good people. If they leave love behind, they're probably good people. If they leave dissension and argumentation and strife and partisanship behind, probably bad people. You'll know them by their fruits. And this is what Barnabas testifies to. I got to see him in Caesarea. I got to see him in Tarsus. I got to be with him on the road between all of these places, and I got to be with him on the way here. When he got here, I got to see how he reacted before he was called before the apostles. I'm willing to vouch for him. Now, from my perspective, if I'm being quite honest, I think they still accepted him in too easy because they only had the testimony of Barnabas. And even Jesus in earlier scriptural records insist that we have two witnesses before we hold something as possibly true. But that's really what it takes. If somebody says, I'm part of you now, the only way to know that is to test. It's to examine them. No, you don't let them in fully. You don't tell them, oh, by the way, the apostles are sitting right over there, and here's where the church are, and we keep the kids over there. Do that.
They had one person step up initially. Ananias was the one person that stepped up. The whole community's exposure was still limited, but he was able to test and see. And then Barnabas was the next person to step up and test and see, and still would have kept the exposure limited. And they still, when he took them to Jerusalem, he didn't just walk them in to introduce everybody. He had that conversation with the council, with all the apostles beforehand, privately, separately, and then they decided he's bearing good fruit now.
And they did not bring Paul in a position of power. He has to earn his place. He, like I said, then goes out with Barnabas and journeys around doing the collections for the saints in Jerusalem. That's what he does. He preaches along the way and eventually gets sent out with more responsibility and more responsibility as he exhibits the ability to handle it and the trustworthiness to be entrusted with it. And that's, I think, the answer none of us want to hear.
Yeah.
Well, this person said this bad thing or they did this bad thing. What do we do next? Well, the first answer is always forgiveness. And remember, forgiveness is for you, not them. Forgiveness is you refusing to let them live rent-free in your brain, continuing to do you harm. That's what forgiveness is. Forgiveness is not condoning what they did. Forgiveness is not saying that they should not have consequences for what they did. Forgiveness is an act that we do that says, no, you have no power over me. I am not letting you live for free in my mind, continuing to cause me harm. I'm going to let this go. I'm going to put this down because I don't have to carry the horrible things that you did in me to continue to do me harm. That's what forgiveness is. Forgiveness is an act for ourselves. It's important to remember that because a lot of people get that wrong. The church forgives him fairly quickly. They do allow him baptism. That forgiveness happens almost immediately. Now, the trust, you see, the trust is not immediately given. And we can see through countless examples why that might be so. When a preacher is caught defrauding and embezzling from the church, he goes to jail and comes out and is immediately put back in charge of a church that he begins to defraud and to embezzle from. Maybe he shouldn't have been put in charge of a church. Maybe he should have had to have earned his way back to that instead of being instantly allowed that position of power. That's what we see in the Paul story. He was a very prominent person in the community. He was a student of Gamaliel, who was the grandson of Hillel. This puts him in a very prestigious place amongst the Pharisees. And yes, Paul, like Jesus, probably was a Pharisee. It's one of the reasons why Jesus had so many critiques for the Pharisees. He was probably one of them. But what Paul is called to do is to learn, to be a part of the community, and to earn a place within it. At any time, if they had seen any of his former problems emerge, that would have been dealt with there. And that's really what we need to be doing when we're asking ourselves how to discern a person.
And that's something that they see even at the beginning, because he goes right back into the zealotry now for the Christians, but against another group, and goes right back out to the old behaviors of, I'm going to attack this other group. And he fails his first round of testing, which is why everyone's like, I don't know. And some were like, maybe he just got to die. And they,
we're just going to kill him.
We're just going to kill him. And
I think
it's
a
like,
lot of people miss that in the story.
Yeah, they do miss that. They literally had to sneak him out a basket, out a window, lowering him down from a wall. This is not even safe rappelling. Climbers get better safety equipment than he would have had getting smuggled out of the city, because it wasn't even like he hid in the back of a cart and rode maybe uncomfortably out of the city. No, he was literally lowered by a basket. He could have fallen to his death, easily, not to mention
in the middle of the day when everybody would have been busy. Nobody had time to be watching for what they were doing. Yeah. But that is something that he had to do to be humble. Mm-hmm. And that's really the other thing here. We are a people of humility. And if somebody says that they wish to be a part of us, but do not wish to be humble, okay, well, you need to address that, because humility is a very important component of who and what we are.
Just to clarify real quick, when we're saying humility, we mean occupying the right space in the moment that you're in. Sometimes that is occupying more space. Sometimes it is occupying less space. Humility isn't just shut up and sit down, which gets used more as more popular definition nowadays. But that's not actual humility. Humility is occupying the space you're supposed to occupy. So early on, when he says, hey, trust me, the humility should be, okay, I'm going to be tested. I need to demonstrate that I can handle these responsibilities that I have previously demonstrated I couldn't handle. And
not be such a hothead.
Not going and attacking other people to try to talk about how great your faith is with the courage of the knife.
To quote the poet, sit down, be humble.
Mm-hmm.
So answers like this are unsatisfactory to a lot of people. We want to say, oh, well, we did a gut check. We say a prayer and we receive a revelation. Note that even Ananias, after receiving a very profound revelation, Jesus Christ himself appears to Ananias, tells him where Saul is and to go get him, that he's okay now, is still like, okay, we'll see. Okay, well, he is actually there. We'll see if he's trustworthy. Even Ananias still has that need for discernment even after revelation. We put way too much store in this idea that we can pull out of nowhere information. It is a thing that happens. Words of knowledge, words of wisdom are a part of the tradition, and they are something that do happen still. But they themselves have to be discerned, and again, are things that can be fixed. Many a preacher has gotten famous for their words of knowledge when they have an earpiece in and somebody whispering it to them. There's a very famous pastor that's going around right now doing that got caught because when his team looked up the woman he was talking to, there just happened to be a woman in the same town with the same name who was roughly the same age, and they pulled up her Facebook instead.
Yeah, the research department got the wrong person.
Yeah. And so he starts talking to her about things about this other woman, and she's like, I have no idea what you're talking about. And that's why.
But that's also where this is still so very vital and important part of being in the kingdom. Everybody is welcome at the table. And could you imagine the church without Paul? If they had just gone, no, you're unredeemable. You've murdered a bunch of Christians or had them murdered. I mean, he didn't directly do it, but he had them murdered, sanctioned their murder, sanctioned killing of Stephen. It just gone, no. And made him an enemy, permanent enemy.
And I would go so far as to say there probably wouldn't be a church today without Paul.
Yeah.
Like Paul's letters were remembered and cherished by the early church to such a degree. He founded so many of the early churches that became centers of the movement. I don't know that there would still be a Christianity without him.
Yeah.
But they discerned even him. It's a slow process. And in our day and age, we hate slow processes. We want everything to be it quick and now. And that's just not how this works. By our works, we prove our faith, as James constantly reminds us. And so we need to see people's works. We need to see the fruit of the Spirit in them. Are they growing in faith, in kindness, in love? Are they growing in meekness and joy? Are these things actually happening in them? Are they sowing division still?
It's back to the prove all things and hold fast to that which is true. And it can be scary. It can be tricky. And the thing is, it's a step-by-step process. You don't just go full exposure either, but you need to have that open door. You need to have that opportunity. And sometimes it takes someone in the community having to risk themselves to be that envoy to allow for that path of redemption. And it can be very scary having to be that person. I've been through that several times in my life, but it's important also to do that. If that's what you're called to do, that's what you're called to do. You know, it's like, I can't deny it. You got to be like, are you sure? We got the right person? Okay, fine. I'm going to do it. And you do that and you just don't risk everybody else.
And in everything, you have to be careful. You have to be cautious. You have to be wise. We are supposed to be wise because we are sheep that are sent out among wolves. And only when we have that discerning wisdom will we be able to make our way in this world. But remember, even though we may in our hearts want to just reject somebody and throw them away when they claim a conversion, we have to wrestle with what might happen if we do reject them. Not just to them, but to the entire movement.
This goes back to what we talked about when we're talking about the Citracra. You're making an enemy, a permanent enemy, and when you other that person, when you're casting them out, you've now created a villain. And especially if there's no path to redemption, then they are a permanent villain.
The essay itself over at creationspast.com, which is called Blinded by the Light, goes through a very detailed explanation of the process of teshuvah, of repentance, of returning to the path, as well as what restitution looks like and what our actual goal is, which we've discussed before in our Living in Babylon, praying for the peace of the city, that we are here to try to find that wholeness, that we are trying to bring that completeness to our experiences and to the world. And sometimes that means bringing in people that we never thought would be in our lives. That does, again, not mean we have to forget what they did. I think it's very important that the church never forgets who Paul was, because we don't need him doing that again, but in the name of Christ. And we can see how much he learned from this. In next week's essay, we're going to be talking about Paul's letter to the Romans and how 2 chapters of it are dedicated to nonviolence, because Paul learned his lesson and changed. Change is possible. It is not always easy. Trust is possible, though not always easy. And remember, always remember, just because somebody who claims authority over you says, don't worry, I trust this guy. No, we have to trust this guy. Paul was brought before the council of the apostles for discernment. They brought him to the group. The group then discerned his character and decided what to do with him, whether to welcome him in or not. We're not putting this all on one person. And that's important, because that one person who's vouching for someone else could have ulterior motives. And again, yes, a lot of what's going on in the church today, I am thinking of 2 very specific examples of that have happened, where somebody who should not have vouched for others did, and further harm resulted from it, because that one person's word was deemed enough. That's not how we work. Remember, Jesus said, where 2 or more are gathered in my name, there I am in the midst of them. We are a community, and we discern as a community.
That's where I also like to say, faith isn't blind. It might be unseen in its actions, but it's not blind.
Not blind. All right. I hope that this has helped you out a little bit, especially with some of the bigger named people in the news lately who have started appearing to wake up. Some of them may be genuine. Others have ulterior motives. We are not going to name who they are because I don't feel like that is really our place in our ministry to do that. Though, should we change our minds on that, we reserve the right to say names. But there have been quite a few very big name people lately that have started saying what sounds like the right thing. But when you go through the discernment process with them and look at the fruit of their actions, no, sorry, that is not what has happened here. I think that's all I'm going to say about that. Always be open. The possibility is there. Anyone could convert and change. It happens. I know that from my own life story, and so does Brian. Change is real, but change also requires discernment and sometimes reparation.
If you're listening to us on YouTube, Spotify, or creationspass.com, you can leave a comment right there. If you're listening to us anywhere else, even if they say you can leave a comment, they don't notify us, so we won't know. But you can leave a comment there anyway, because engagement is magic. And then head over to creationspass.com, click on chat, and you can leave a message there, and we will see it, and we will be able to get back to you. While you're there, if you happen to have a few dollars, you can pass our way. We offer monthly and annual memberships. You can also support us on Patreon and Ko-fi. I am CE Dorset on both, and you can support us using the Cash App hashtag CreationsPaths. Thank you to everybody who does that. We are ever so grateful. Thank you so much. You all really do help us keep the lights on, keep a roof over our head, and food on our table. If we've ever said anything that's helped you out, please share it with others. That helps us out more than you know.
So as we're heading out, as we often do, we like to end in prayer. Oh, sweet Lord Jesus, help us to remember that mercy always triumphs over judgment, but that mercy must be wise and discerned and righteous. The righteousness is living in right relationship one with another. And so long as we are doing that, we are living on the narrow path that leads us home. Amen.
Amen.